Who starts on the opposite side of Darius Slay? Today, I'm going to start off with candidate number one to take over that position, which I'm assuming, depending on what side Slay likes to play, would probably be your left corner position. So, first candidate up, Sidney Jones. All right, y'all, let's talk about it. What's up, Eagles Nation? What's going on, NFL world? How you doing, division rivals? This is Steven Hyder with Gate City Sports Channel, the sports channel where the cerebral NFL fan comes for about 10 minutes of daily content. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever it is you get around to watching this. Once again, guys, my name is Steven Hyder, and this is Gate City Sports Channel. All right, y'all, today's topic, we're going to talk about Sidney Jones and the possibility of this young man playing the left cornerback role or the opposite corner role from Darius Slay. I got to be honest with you guys. I went through and I did, some research and some film study on this kid. Definitely a few things that kind of popped up that caught my attention. So I was just playing around. I was looking at the measurements of combine and the physical measurements of Sidney Jones versus Ronald Darby, just to kind of get an idea of what I was getting myself into, maybe to try to bring clarity to what I see on film with these two guys. And there were a couple of really interesting things that I noticed about them. Number one, what's crazy is that Sidney Jones has a much larger hand size than Ronald Darby, and he's got a longer arm length. But when they did the wingspan measurements between Sidney Jones and Ronald Darby had the greater wingspan, which is interesting. It's always interesting to me how that kind of works out, guys. If you don't know what wingspan is, guys, it's just like when you hold your arms out. It's basically tip to tip, guys, measuring that wingspan, okay? Ronald Darby, probably not going to surprise a lot of people, man, had phenomenal testing results, man, in terms of his his shuttle times. So his 20-yard shuttle, all of his shuttle times, right? It's 20 and the 60, his 40-yard dash, his vertical. Ronald Darby measured elite level. The dude is athletic as it comes. He just can't play the football. That's the problem. We all have known this about Ronald Darby for a while. And I was kind of looking at Sidney Jones's numbers, and Sidney Jones is kind of he's in the middle somewhere. But the crazy thing is when I turn on film of Sidney Jones, this kid's a very good technician, guys. And what I want to get into is today, I took a look at Sidney Jones, and I was really looking at the Giants game because what I noticed about the Giants game is this, guys. It was the game in which he received the most snaps, not only on defense, but also special teams, okay? And, he was relied on quite heavily, and I got to be real with you guys. He played really well. As a matter of fact, the combination of Sidney Jones, not even kidding, guys, the combination of Sidney Jones and there with Cre'von LeBlanc in there with Rasul Douglas brought a physicality to the secondary. These guys were coming up and smacking these little underneath, screen route stuff. These guys were shutting that crap down. It was nice to see that, and it shocked me a little bit that when we went over to the Seattle game into the playoffs, that these guys didn't even log any defensive snaps between Rasul Douglas and Sidney Jones. They played on special teams, but they didn't log not even one snap on defense. All right, guys. With all that said, it's time to roll into the film, guys. I'm going to break up the film to show you guys a little bit about Sidney Jones, and we'll have a little discussion at the end. All right, y'all. Let's get it. All right, ladies and gents, as I start to analyze this game, one of the first things I wanted to take a look at, guys, was Sidney Jones in zone coverage. If you guys remember, I made a video during last year where I was talking about, hey, Sidney Jones he looks pretty good actually in man coverage, but man, when they put this kid in zone, I had a little saying where I said, when Sidney Jones is stinking, Sidney Jones is stinking. What I want to do here today, guys, is I want to take you through and I want you to see the Eagles playing their cover 3 pass defense. Because let's be honest, guys, the Eagles are, last season and under Corey Underlin, they played a lot of cover 3 zone concepts, single high safety, cover 3 zone concepts. And look, we got a guy coming in Markin Manuel that I've heard he likes to run more cover 1 than he does cover 3. And that would seem to suit people. But at the same time, I can look at the physical numbers and I can see just how often the Eagles played zone versus man. As a matter of fact, I'll throw an illustration up on the screen right now for you guys to take a look at, and you can see
where the Eagles were in terms of zone coverage versus man coverage. Here's a man coverage template to show you where you got New England basically number one, playing a lot of man coverage. And then look at Philly. I mean, Philly's towards the back half of the league here. We just didn't run as much man as I heard. And I heard a lot of sports columnists say, like, oh, the Eagles, are primarily a man defense. And I'm sorry, but the film, nor does the actual physical analytics support that statement. I think the Eagles aspire to be a cover one, but we played a crap ton of cover three, guys. I'm not even going to lie. Even in this game against the Giants, there were a couple plays where the Eagles were running cover two. So what I want to do here, guys, is I want to show you guys Sidney Jones, what I thought was progression from Sidney Jones playing cover three. I mean, I thought that this game in particular, I'm not going to say it was all perfect, but I saw major steps forward in his zone coverage abilities. And if this kid looks like this season, he's going to do well. I'm not going to lie, guys. He might be one of these bounce-back/comeback players for the organization. Watch as the Giants run this seam route. They're trying to attack Sidney Jones' side of the field. If Sidney Jones, and you guys can see I've paused it here, if Sidney Jones gets out of position here, right, if he gets duped into moving his coverage and getting out of his assigned responsibility into that seam route, then that outside breaking route's going to get open. But Sidney Jones showed growth here, guys. I mean, simply put, he grew in this particular spot, and you can see how he recovers, gets his body, doesn't leave his assignment. I mean, and just completely makes that a throwaway pass. That was all Sidney Jones playing the ball perfectly, resulting in that throwaway. This is tremendous growth from Sidney Jones from early in the year, and what I saw earlier on in the year from this kid.
And in man coverage, guys, I got to tell you, there was one play in particular. I watched this kid. You talk about shadow on players and movement. Watch what Sidney Jones does to Darius Slayton on a man coverage situation here. Now, I will warn you, the play does not go to Sidney Jones' side because Sidney Jones was playing pretty damn well, guys. They just weren't targeting Sidney Jones past a certain point. It goes to Rasul Douglas' side, which Rasul makes a pretty decent play himself on the ball. But watch what Sidney Jones does to Darius Slayton, guys. It just illustrates that when this kid is on his game, he is incredibly talented, guys.
Sidney Jones is in a man press situation, right? Watch off the release of this, off the hike. Watch what he does here. Look at him mirroring this player. Okay, let me pause it right here. Okay, look. Right about the 5-yard mark, you're going to see Sidney Jones says, I'm getting my hands on, I'm getting into the body while it's still legal, right? He's getting his hands all over Darius Slayton in that legal zone area. That first 5 yards. He hits him right at that 5-yard mark. There is nowhere for Darius Slayton to go. There is nowhere for Daniel Jones to go with this football. So he has to basically try to go after that slot receiver. And to be honest with you, that slot receiver did gain a little separation, but, in defense there, I mean, you can see the recovery it's a good recovery by Rasul Douglas. But, man, the bottom side of your screen there, what happened to Darius Slayton on that play? That's Sidney Jones playing at a very high level, guys. That's what we want to see consistently from this young man. Down in, down out, game in, game out from this young man. Live up to that billing, young man.
The common thing I hear from a lot of opposing fan bases when it comes to our secondary, when they're like, you guys are being a little delusional about how good your secondary is, because they're not getting the nuance of what we're saying. None of us are saying this secondary is a lockdown, shutdown thing right from the start. We don't know. But I will say this, the common thing I always hear is who's going to cover this player then? Who's going to cover outside of Darius Slay? They forget we have Nickel Roby-Coleman, who's probably arguably one of the best slot guys in the league. I mean, he's definitely top 3. But outside of that, what I'll say is when you look at the physical tools, when you look at the mechanics of playing this position from Sidney Jones, he can do it. And he can do it at a very high level against a very good competition. He did it down the stretch to a lot of guys. Amari Cooper, he had a huge breakup against, right? He had Gallop in the end zone, the game-sealing breakup. Okay, I'm about to roll a clip here in a second and show you what this young man did to Darius Slayton down in the red zone. Sidney Jones' issue is consistency. It is not the spurt moment play thing. This kid has the physical gifts and the physical tools to be really good in the NFL. I don't know what happened with these young men. After I watched what I just saw in this Giants game, for these guys not to log any minutes, I don't know what was going on with Corey Unlin and these guys, but I'm excited to see what Markin Manuel does with these young guys, because what I saw down the stretch on film was some pretty clutch play from these young guys. I don't know where the disconnect was, guys, but I'm excited to see the potential. But anyways, let me go back to that whole question of who can shut down somebody outside of Darius Slay. Well, I'm going to show you how good this kid is mechanically. Watch what he does to Darius Slayton here, guys.
So the Eagles come out on this play in a pre-snap look of what looks like it'd be cover 3, right? I mean, you could kind of see the way they're looking. This looks like your standard typical, like, 3 deep, 4 underneath kind of coverage. Cover 3, trying to, really play that goal line, not let anyone get across there. But watch as the ball slowly gets hiked here, what the Eagles do. Because what you're going to see is now you get Sidney Jones. Watch him creep down, creep down, creep down. Now we're in a man press situation with Sidney Jones, okay? What the Eagles are doing is really smart. They're giving you what's going to be a post-snap look of a mixed coverage. So on Rasul Douglas' side of the field, they're playing zone. On Sidney Jones' side, they got him locked down in a man situation, which I think is a beautiful call on the part of Jim Schwartz, because what you're doing is you're playing to the actual physical skill sets of both players. Rasul Douglas is much better in zone. Sidney Jones is much better in man coverage. And they're really playing to this. Now watch as the film runs. Watch the job Sidney Jones does here. Look at him get in front of that ball and break it up. That's the way you play coverage, guys. You're asking me who can be the guy that steps up and covers, who can cover Michael Gallop? Well, he's already done it once in a pivotal moment to clinch the NFC East. So I'm going to stick to my original answer here. Sidney Jones is going to lock y'all down.
So, guys, some final thoughts on this topic is this. If you go back to the Giants game, the Eagles were really doing pretty well when they were playing both Sidney Jones and they were playing Avonte Maddox outside. They were kind of rotating them in and out. Sidney Jones started that game as the starter. Then on third down in the first series, they pulled Sidney, and then they put Avonte in. The next couple of series, Avonte primarily played with Sidney coming in on third down, and then Avonte got injured in a zone, kind of breakup play. So then it all fell on Sidney Jones' shoulders, and I thought he carried the load pretty damn well, personally. Here's the thing, though, when you talk about Sidney Jones, guys. He's got the physical abilities, right? I mean, he plays the position really well, especially in man coverage, and he really came on in zone, guys. I'm not going to say it was pretty. There were a couple plays in zone where I thought he had a couple of letdowns, but the progression, the progress I saw from him from that Green Bay game and the Minnesota game, some other games where they had Sidney playing zone, it didn't look right. He was just completely lost in his thoughts trying to diagnose the play. He looked a lot different come the end of the year. It seemed like he was really picking up on the scheme and what the expectations were for him. Now, Sidney Jones' frustration to me is the nagging lower body injuries. He's had this throughout his career with the hamstrings and stuff like that. He's got to stay on the field to make an impact, guys. That's the bigger issue in my opinion. If Sidney Jones can stay on the field, I think this kid could win the job, because I do think that in terms of outside coverage ability and what he's supposed to do and the technique, I think he's clearly the best technician here. But there's two other guys I want to talk about during the course of who could take this position, okay? We got to talk about Avonte Maddox, guys. And you want to talk about someone staying in a receiver's hip pocket? He's one of the best at it, guys. I mean, this kid is pretty phenomenal at staying in that hip pocket. I got to give Avonte Maddox his due here. And then I want to throw in the one wild card, okay? It's not really a wild card. You already know who it's going to be, guys, but I do want to save that one because I do think there were 3 candidates here. This was candidate number 1, guys. All right, y'all. Let me know your thoughts. Leave your comments down below. Let's talk, guys. You already know what the next 2 videos are going to be coming up are going to be about. All right, y'all. I'm out here. You know how we end these videos. We do a little E-A-G-L-E-S. All right, y'all. Let's go, Eagles.